Hello and welcome to another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Ciavolelli, here as always with Justin Crosby, Sam DiGiovanni. And today we're going to talk about not only some of the moves the Sixers have made this offseason, but if they have finally built a contender. We're going to talk a little bit about some potential pieces they could add from here. And then also briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about that little uniform. Not a uniform scare, I guess you call it a tease. It's a real big tease that the Sixers did give their fans. So we'll talk about all that and more on today's episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. All right. Welcome. Some business to attend here to today as the Sixers have added Paul George, Caleb Martin, Eric Gordon, Andre Drummond, brought back Kelly Oubre, brought back Tyrese Maxey. A lot to talk about on today's episode of Still Processing. Of course, we have our hosts, as always, myself, Zach Ciavolelli, here with Justin and Sam. Justin, Sam, how you guys doing in free agency so far?
I like what the Sixers did a lot. We'll get breakdown what they did, and I will say that after those initial moves, I kind of started to get some slop withdrawal. Kind of a lot of the big dominoes happened first, and then it was kind of like seeing what happened with DeRozan now that he's with the Kings, and I'm scared to say that we might be out of big roster moves to look forward to unless the Larry Markkinen domino falls. But it's been an interesting free agency so far, plenty of movement, and the Sixers, I think, have to be regarded as one of the biggest winners, not just for Paul George, but for some of the other guys we'll talk about. So excited to chop it up with you guys. Things are looking good in Sixerland right now for sure.
Justin, how are we feeling, man?
Yeah, man. I definitely way better than anybody could have hoped as far as the fan base. I see a lot of people were giving flack before the offseason even started because moves were being made around the Sixers with competitors, such as the Knicks and other people, and they were just waiting for Morey to do something. Well, he did. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he sure did. It was a rather risky plan, going for it, heading into this offseason, with cap space. It sounds great when you mention it at first, like, hey, we're going to go into next season with a ton of cap space. We're going to try and just sign one of these guys outright, not have to give up any draft picks, no compensation out of our hands to get these guys except for straight cash. It sounds great. Also kind of sounds like a dream. Doesn't really sound overly realistic, especially as you saw the free agency pool kind of drying up a little bit. LeBron was always more of a fantasy than a reality. You had guys signing deals before free agency even started, talking about like Malik Monk, for instance. And then you get to free agency, and Daryl actually goes out and gets the guy. And a big part of that was the just collapse by the Los Angeles Clippers in retaining Paul George, which George detailed on his own podcast. That entire process where they just honestly, they seemed unserious about keeping him in town. And say what you will about how, what implication that has about the Sixers signing of Paul George and, whether or not this was, LA has kind of deemed him cooked or whatever, which I don't think that is the case. I'm just throwing out, what the kind of stuff we see on NBA Twitter, but, all that in consideration, 34-year-old guy, I get it. I'm excited about the Paul George edition. The team is clearly excited about the Paul George edition. Something that be on the lookout tomorrow for. You're going to be able to read all about this. I talked to Tyrese Maxey, who is very excited about the Paul George edition. And just the entire team, top to bottom. Joel, he's talked about it. Everyone's talked about it. It's an exciting time in Philadelphia. They brought out Dr. J, all the stops. So that's just the general mood from the people that I mentioned. Everyone watching live, everyone listening today, let us know how you're feeling about Paul George and that addition. That's obviously the biggest free agent acquisition that Philadelphia made. Before we kind of go into some of the additional ones, Sam, we didn't have you on last week. I want to get your take real quick just on Paul George and what you think he just by himself means to this team now that he's contributing to this new big three.
I think whatever thoughts anyone might have about Paul George, kind of have to look at it from the lens of what could the Sixers have done right now. If you are of the belief that they should have done other stuff previously to get other stars or whatever, you can have that opinion. But looking at who was available reasonably, obviously we kind of know now LeBron was really never leaving the Lakers. But so with that in mind, like Paul George was the best they could have done. Obviously not the perfect addition, but such a huge move to attract a star like that away from his hometown. And even though now that Paul got into some pretty specific details on his podcast, he was really welcomingly transparent about the behind the scenes his talks with the Clippers, and so it's clear that he was on his way out because the Clippers weren't valuing him as much as they probably should have. But still, the fact that the Sixers are the one to get him is fantastic. He fits super, super well with Embiid and Maxey as a shooter. If the vision of the team is Embiid the one, Maxey the two, as far as options go, then you want to have a guy who can, light it up from three and can also create shots off of the gravity that he has. Paul George does that really, really well. Even at his advanced age, even if he's not throwing down the crazy dunks he used to, he's still super, super talented, can make some nice, plays off of that. He's not a super great playmaker, but he's good enough to where, and he's good enough scorer to where you have, this three-headed monster who can, all three guys are great scorers, and they're, finding ways to keep the ball moving off of that when the defense comes over to them. Defensively, I don't expect much from Paul George. Not to say that he's going to be bad, but I don't expect him to be like the number one wing defender. I think they would be better off, finding other guys to take on the bigger assignments. And Paul will be obviously a switchable guy who will create some steals here and there. But bottom line, I think it was a fantastic move for the Sixers. I mean, whatever the contract's going to look like in a few years, it doesn't matter. This was the best chance to maximize the next few years they have to contend. So I think the Paul George signing was a fantastic move for them. And for whatever, nitpicks you want to have about it, you just have to look in general, consider like he's an all-star player, shoots the ball super, super well from the wing, and they've got, other guys. Shooting has been a big theme for the offseason for them, obviously. And so I think it's just a great move. And from all indications, it seems like everyone involved is like super excited to get going.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree. I think that there's a lot of excitement that we're going to see building next season. William Butcher checks in, talking about wanting to add Gordon Hayward or Precious Achiuwa on a vet minimum. We're going to get to guys like this a little bit later in the pod, but those are two names that I know have been mentioned frequently just among Sixers fans about possible additions around this team. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about some of the guys that are currently on the team already brought in, some people who can kind of fill in those roles. And, you talked about, Sam, the desire to have someone who can kind of take those lead defensive assignments over Paul George. It looks as though the starting five is filled out, right? And there's a couple guys in this starting five who should be able to take that pressure off of Paul George. Now neither of them is, an OG Anunoby type, but they each have their own skill set that might be able to help the team in that capacity. And we saw at times one of the guys who came back, get Kelly Oubre, re-signed to a 2-year deal worth $16.3 million. Served at times as a point of attack defender for Philadelphia, kind of took that lead defensive assignment, borderline just out of necessity, if for no other reason. But he has that ability, really took a step forward defensively. Between Paul George and between new addition Caleb Martin as well, who is admittedly more of a secondary defender or an off-ball defender than he is a primary point of attack defender. Having all that in front of Joel Embiid, how much do you value that, and how much does that kind of solve that issue? Sam, we'll start with you, kind of based on what you were saying on what you kind of want to limit with which is having Paul George take that primary assignment.
Yeah, so Caleb Martin, obviously not like one of the biggest signings this offseason, or at least he's not on the same level as Paul George, but I think at least for the Sixers, he is as close to just as important as you can get without quite matching it because there's plenty of debate about the Sixers have the best big three in basketball and whatever. Like that may be true, but I truthfully don't care that much. Like I don't think it matters to me that much in the way the NBA is going now and how teams are built. We just watched all the teams that made deep into the playoffs have pretty deep rotations. At least they go 8 deep with guys who are really really good. If they're not stars, if they're not superstars, they're at least guys who have a high level skill or can make a high level impact here and there. And obviously, they were going to have to give Paul George the max. But I was curious, okay, now that you have this max, now that Joel has his max and you have to keep enough space open for Maxey, who can you really get with whatever flexibility they had left? And so they moved on from Paul Reed, interestingly, that he didn't get traded, but I guess I kind of get it if there was no real market out there and everyone kind of knew he was going to be a cap casualty anyway. No one was going to give anything up for him. But to get Caleb Martin and to get on the contract that they got him is, I mean, everyone knows it's a steal now, and we're going to be looking at that in a few years, like still laughing at how fantastic value that was. He declined more money from the Heat to come join the Sixers, and I think on top of being a killer in the playoffs, he is a guy who, even if he's not the most elite on-ball defender, I think he's still pretty dang good, and he's a guy who is willing to do some of the dirty work on top of scoring here and there, getting his shots up. So he is like the precise type of role player I wanted the Sixers to target alongside their big three. So to get him and to get him for multiple years is huge. And we'll talk more about how kind of the rest of the rotation shakes out with who else they got. But to get Martin in particular, to keep Kelly Oubre and to have that be the starting five, again, we'll talk about that a little later on. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's still pretty dang good. And to have so much athleticism, shooting, defensive versatility around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, I think is some really good work by the Sixers front office.
How many years have fans and we in the media watched this team and consistently said, you know what this team needs? This team needs capable two-way wings. And now you come out this season, this off season, and whether they reacquired or acquired, you now have 3 starting wings in this on this team who are capable of doing just that. I mean, that's incredible. It seems obvious, and yet teams don't often approach it this way. And I'm not trying to blow smoke, right? Because there's still the matter of, well, you have to actually get the job done. But you take a look at an obvious need and you address it. That's just not something that we're used to seeing in Philadelphia, and not even just with the Sixers team, but those additions of Caleb Martin, those additions, of Kelly Oubre. I've seen some people kind of compare the Caleb Martin addition to, it's PJ Tucker 2.0. Well, let's not only talk about the extreme age difference, between or noticeable age difference, I should say, between Caleb Martin and PJ Tucker when the Sixers got him. Well, there's the fact that Caleb Martin, while he can't do, I'm not saying he has the most versatile game, is more versatile than PJ Tucker. On top of that, the correlation is true in the most positive of sense, though, where you have a guy who theoretically can operate as that true 3-and-D, and he's an absolute dog. That's something that Philadelphia thought they were getting with PJ Tucker. They kind of had it. It still wasn't, effectively what they were hoping it was. And now in Caleb Martin, you have a chance to repeat history potentially with a successful outcome this time. So, Justin, what do you think about Caleb Martin? Are you a fan of the signing, and what kind of impact do you think that he can have this year with the Sixers?
I mean, on the value that they got for him, I mean, it's excellent signing. And to the point where everyone felt that, including the Sixers, felt that he was just not gettable with the possible price range it would take, looking for over, I mean, it was reported that, I was looking for $15 million a year. So to get him for half of that, right, per year at this point, it's an amazing get. He fits in well because, again, this team has needed athleticism, wings, hustle. Those are the type of things that they need around Joel and Maxey and now Paul George. So to get Caleb Martin to slot into one of the wings, because I think they're all interchangeable. I don't know if it's whether he's playing power forward or small forward or shooting guard, whatever. They are interchangeable. There's just three wings. You'll see their faces every night next to each other. Doesn't matter what position they play. But at the end of the day, it's a good get. And I think it allows, I think in a sense, this will help save Joel defensive energy and rebounding because they'll have more switchability on the perimeter, which will then allow Joel not to necessarily go for every block or try to disrupt everything at the rim to where somebody can get a weak side offensive rebound on them, or you have more athletic guys out there looking to help rebound, or in Caleb Martin's sense, more athletic and a guy who will understand his role is to play defense. You'll get some shots and you need to hustle and try to get every rebound. Like that's going to be his role. And he's going to play that role well. And he played that role well in Miami, so there's no reason why he wouldn't do it in Philadelphia. So, I think it's a good fit. I think whether, depending on what other moves they make down the line, right, whether he'll go to the bench, whether it be Oubre go to the bench, whatever, just having that type of guy on the court and in the rotation is magnificent for the Sixers. And, having those three guys, it'll help save Maxey too on the defensive. And I'm not saying Maxey's a slouch. He's got much better moving his feet, getting into ball handlers, trying to fight through screens, getting in the passing lanes. He's gotten much better since he's gotten to the league. So he's not a defensive zero at all. But putting Maxey on the third best perimeter player or, just stand in a corner shooter for him to just randomly shoot the passing lanes, that's a plus for this team and the defense. So I think it's coming together nicely, and I think he's a great fit.
Yeah, I mean, on that Maxey point, I think that he's grown immensely as a defender since coming into the league to the point where I don't think he's an egregious negative anymore. That being said, he's not going to be, mistaken for Gary Payton. So if you're able to save him from defending one of those top options, on the perimeter, that's huge. And on top of that, it works into saving himself offensively and saving that energy, preserving it in that sense. You talked about a similar concept with Joel Embiid and preserving him defensively and assisting his rebounding. Just a couple things on that real quick. I know Derek Bodner's theorized a point. Derek Bodner of All Philly, or PHLY Sports, has theorized effectively that having this extra defensive acumen on the wing, right, and this ability on the wing theoretically should, as you mentioned, Justin, kind of open up things for Joel, as it were. Not only offensively, sure that'll happen. Not only as a rim protector, but as a rebounder as well. Should allow him to spend a little bit more time, closer around the basket, so he doesn't, always have to work his way out so much and try and head guys off, which, to Joel's credit, for a guy his size, he's very capable of doing. But by preventing that, you're able to potentially see him effectively rebound the ball a lot better, which is something that he, at times, we've seen kind of come away from through situationally depending, if it is a matter of want to, or if it's a matter of need to go somewhere else so I can't. It kind of effectively rules out that need to for Joel, opening up that opportunity for him to grab significantly more rebounds, I feel like, and possibly maybe not cure the Sixers' rebounding problems. That's still going to be an issue when you look at the size of the team outside of Embiid and Andre Drummond, but it's at least an improvement on where it's been in past years. So before we take a look at some of like the bench guys that Philadelphia's added, let's look at this starting lineup. Well, you know what? Actually, no. Let's get to the bench guys first, and then we're going to look at the totality of the roster as it stands today, right? So I mentioned Andre Drummond. Bringing Drum back to Philly, I think, was a no-brainer as long as the money worked, and it appears that the money worked, right? So 2 years, $10-ish million. Andre Drummond is back in Philadelphia. He's now joined by former Hinkie Rocket, or former Morey Rocket, I should say, Eric Gordon, in Philadelphia. adding these guys, you know, a little bit of a spark plug offensively in Eric Gordon, you know, a nice, tough, deep shooter. And then again, more toughness, rim protection, rebounding, and Andre Drummond, you know, bringing in those guys to this team, compounding them with, you know, Ricky Council still on the team. You expect him to take a step forward. Hopefully you get something out of Jared McCain in his rookie season. You know, with all that combined, how are we feeling about Philadelphia's, you know, and of course that's headlined by the addition of Paul George. How are you feeling about the Sixers' chance at contention next year? You know, Sam, is this a team that has already kind of transformed themselves into a potential contender? Not a title favorite necessarily, but a potential contender, or are they still a move or two away from that?
So they're definitely, I would say, on potential contender status because they've got such great talent up front, and they have enough depth to where they're not going to have to fight for like G Leaguer guys. I don't think they have quite the same glaring lack of depth that like the Suns did last year. That they were unsuccessful for a lot of reasons, but that was kind of part of it. I think that they've the fact that they have two intriguing rookies, at least one that you can maybe kind of expect for some first year value in McCain, to get Caleb Martin, to resign Kelly, to get Drummond. Like I think their depth right now is fine, and I think as constructed, assuming they don't add any more players who are going to be like primary rotation guys, aside from maybe like Kyle Lowry, who they are still like they've been rumored to sign. I think that they are definitely better suited than they were last year, but I'm not ready to call them a contender on the level of the Celtics or maybe even on some of the West teams yet, because that lack of depth still is pretty glaring, and the lack of size in the projected starting lineup, which is Maxey, Oubre, George, Martin, and Embiid, is a legitimate issue that I think will come back to bite them. Now, that starting five is fine. Like you've got three stars in there, you've got two decent role players, but I've been saying this frequently. I think that Kelly Oubre is best used off the bench. Obviously, the athleticism and size he brings is really key, but as a fifth starter, I think you want someone who has more definable skills on offense, aside from just he'll go try to get his own shot or he'll be good for the occasional, crashing the glass, which is a skill of his. But, I think a lot of people look at him as like, oh, a guy who would just, kind of be a spot up shooter, and like he'll shoot the shots, but he didn't shoot well last year with the Sixers. He was pretty good with Joel on the floor, but he was really, really bad with him off of it. His 3-point percentage last year was lower than most of the league, including even guys like Matisse Thybulle. And we all talked about his problems shooting here. Obviously, Kelly has the volume down that Matisse didn't and still doesn't. But the fact that his 3-point percentage, 31%, like that's really, really bad. And he's not someone who's a super great playmaker either. He showed some flashes of getting downhill, dumping the ball off, but that's really not that much. Like I think the Sixers, and on defense, again, he tries, he puts in the effort, but I don't think he is the insane high level defender that will, serve as like a high level contributor consistently on that end. Again, he brings the effort, he brings the energy that we all really like to see last year, but I think they can definitely do better. And to have that, kind of bundle of energy off the bench, I think is way more valuable. It gets tricky to see who they'll do. Obviously, we've been Sixers has been talking for days about the KJ Martin balloon deal, if that's possible, what that's going to do. So that's probably a part of the roster that we'll have to be patient to see how it pans out. I think that they are firmly in the Eastern Conference, at least. The Sixers are in the second tier with the Knicks. We have to kind of see how the Knicks replace Isaiah Hartenstein, who was a big piece of their team last year. Now, the fact that they got Mikal Bridges and have arguably the best wing rotation in the league, or at least amongst guys who don't have like a star at the wing, they have four super high level rotation players. Like that offsets the loss of Hartenstein. But I think that their depth, like I mentioned previously, of really deep guys at the top, at the starting lineup, top of the bench rotation, who are super, super good role players at the very worst. Like that's something that I think gives them strength in numbers in a different way that I question if the Sixers have that now or will be able to add a guy that makes it noticeably different. The Celtics running it almost the exact same roster, I think, like not just their main guys, but like even deep into their bench, they've been bringing guys back. So they're still intact. They're still really good, but the Sixers definitely did get better, and we'll see how much more flexibility they have to continue to get better. Again, as constructed, I think they're better than last year, and they have a better chance than they did to contend. But I think in order to pencil them in as real true contenders. They're 1 or 2 moves away.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put anyone on the level of the Celtics after the postseason performance that we saw from them. Probably the one team that you at least hope to see make that bit of a leap be the Oklahoma City Thunder. With the additions that they've made in Caruso and Hartenstein, and effectively not losing any other contributor. That team's obviously still very young. That's something that did play a factor in the postseason this past year. So we'll see. That being said, I myself, I think that this is a team that, I mean, listen, when you're talking about a contender, I think it is a rather more broad term. And I think one of the factors that you have to include here is just the way that they match up with the Celtics. Tyrese has had his struggle with the Celtics in the past. It seemed at times this past season that he was becoming a bit more adept at figuring them out a little bit. You hope that Paul George can kind of open things up. But then there's the fact that the Celtics really just don't have a way to stop Joel Embiid. Al Horford for years has been that stopper, and it's seemingly proving less and less effective. So the hope, at least, is, and it's just a hope until it's actually proven in concept, but is that Joel Embiid will be able just to be so dominant against a team like Boston that you can overcome those depth issues and so on and so forth. But for now, I agree, like that absolutely is a concern. So on these final few spots that they do have, they really do have to hit with some of these free agents and come the buyout market. That's why preserving that flexibility and making sure how you interact with the first and second apron, absolutely matters in terms of being able to add these guys later in the season. But before we get to kind of some of the names who may be able to fill roles here or there, you talked about someone who could potentially start over Kelly Oubre. Justin, where are you really effectively standing at right now in terms of this team and their potential ability to contend next season?
I do think there are, of course, everybody's looking up at the Celtics. Like that's number one. But I think they are in contention, specifically from Eastern Conference standpoint. You talk about the Knicks and the moves they've made, the Sixers and the moves they've made. I think again they do have some holes that they need to fill, whether it's the free agency remaining, getting guys to take veteran minimum deals, chip chasing, or later on down the line with some trades. We talked about, Sam mentioned the KJ Martin expected balloon payment to have as a trade piece, but right now missing some playmaking. I think that's a piece. I think, passing wise on the roster, they don't have a true facilitator. And I think that could, come back to bite them at some point. Although, again, we can't count on Maxey. We can't count on Maxey not being able to improve that skill set on this game. He's done something every year to improve his game. So, I would expect him to get better at, his playmaking, making some of those skip passes across the court and just read the defense better out of the pick and roll or driving to the rim. But, rebounding, we talked about that. But then, I look at, the Knicks last year, they didn't have, I think they have Hartenstein start, then OG, who was 6'7" or 6'8", and then the rest were 6'4" and under people, and they managed to crash the glass. Like, again, I'm not an NBA player and I'm not out there, but I do know that a lot of rebounding is effort. And if Nick Nurse had instituted this rebound camp last year in the beginning of the year, you've seen it kind of make a difference because Sixers have notoriously been a bad rebounding team. But they have some of the guys now who will be saying, hey, your role is to get rebounds, crash the boards, and help this team, with their rebounding issues. And I think they can do that currently constructed. They can add a veteran or two for the power forward position that can help with that. But, honestly, it depends on, what that veteran is. That veteran is not Paul George, but is 35 years old and doesn't have it anymore, then, maybe it's not such a good idea, or maybe they won't help them. But I do think they're firmly in the contender status. You could probably throw Milwaukee in there, although who knows with them. And then in the West, I think the Sixers maybe in general in contention is because Dallas has gotten better, OKC has gotten better. Minnesota is there as well. But then you look at Denver, who knows what's happening out there, right? There are rumors. I just read something online about Jamal Murray and them and their extension talks not going well. So who knows what's going to happen with Denver right now? They're pushing to get Russell Westbrook. So, who knows what's going to happen in Denver. Not to say that they won't, wind up being in contention, but it's just tough. But I do think they're in contention right now, but they do have some holes to be fixed. And I think rebounding and playmaking, and you can always use more shooting, but rebounding and playmaking, I think, is something they have to address with these last couple roster spots.
Yeah, and it all depends on effectively where they make these moves, right? You mentioned power forward. Are they able to land a talent, at power forward at the minimum, who's going to be able to make that impact? Are they going to opt instead to go a little bit smaller with it and just again effectively be one of those smaller teams? You mentioned New York saw some success. We've seen that from a few different teams that they've been able to effectively not quite play small ball to succeed, but go a bit smaller at certain positions. Now looking and kind of taking a move over to some of the potential names that they could add. Who's somebody that kind of sticks out to you? Sam, why don't we start with you that potentially Philadelphia could look at and maybe strike a bargain here on the veteran minimum? Obviously there's the guys who've been mentioned a lot, the Kyle Lowry's potentially coming back, Marcus Morris, those kind of guys, but maybe a guy who isn't returning, maybe more so a fresh new name out there.
So as far as the veteran minimum guys go, it's tougher to see. I mean, Lowry is probably one of the best options out there, even at his age, just of like what he brings to the table. But one guy who I don't know if he would be attainable by the veteran minimum. He's a restricted free agent, and his GM said today that like they do want to bring him back. So I'm not sure if he would be potentially, very likely they'll be a Sixer, but Trendon Watford is his name. Played with the Nets. How'd you know that, Zach? I'm impressed that you. Did you
well,
see
I
that
saw
too?
the tweet, but okay. I'm restricted free agent. I knew right then.
Yeah,
I'm a big Watford guy, so I'm very in on him.
Yeah, I like him as well. I don't know if he's a guy that, if they do project him to be a starter, it would be kind of out of the ordinary for them to get someone more unproven. But I think he's a guy who is really, really smart with the ball in his hands. Kind of brings that connective passing, that just keeping the ball moving, taking a step into the defense and making sure the stars keep having it. Similar to what Nico Batum brought last year. He's not quite as smart as Nico, but Nico's a veteran who's been in the league much longer than he has. He's pretty athletic, and I think he's got some defensive versatility to him that would make him appealing to Nick Nurse. He's not a great shooter. He shot efficiently, but his three-point volume is really lacking. But he's a guy that, as someone to maybe bring off the bench, sort of a gadget player, I would be very, very intrigued by. Again, I don't think it's likely. I think the Nets are going to end up keeping him eventually, but he would be a guy that if they got, I would be very interested by as an under-the-radar guy.
So I'm a big Trendon Watford fan. I would love to talk a little bit more about him. We do have some mildly breaking news that's not really breaking news. So according to Hoopsider's Michael Scotto, the trade involving Harrison Barnes and DeMar DeRozan, so on and so forth, has officially gone through. The Spurs, in a counter move just with receiving Harrison Barnes, have waived former Sixer Charles Bassey. Now, Adem Bona is projected to get a standard contract from the Sixers. He signs that final two-way spot. Who knows? Maybe that opens up a reunion for Charles Bassey. I think the Sixers have probably done that avenue, but just for a former Sixer to give him his due respect, just wanted to mention that real briefly. But going back to Watford, I think that's the type of addition that you'd love to make. A young guy who potentially has some promise. You're improving athleticism, defensive versatility. I think is a huge part of Watford's game that you'd be able to rely on a little bit there. Justin, what are you kind of looking for on this veteran, market for somebody who could potentially come in and play the minimum for Philadelphia next season?
I mean, a couple guys, I think. First, from a guard standpoint, I know we talked about Kalo, which may be something that's happening, but From a guard perspective, Dennis Smith Jr. kind of piques my interest. His athleticism from the guard position. He's actually played I won't say a lot better, but he's played better defensively over the last year or two, trying to make his mark in the league. He was supposed to be a star, but didn't turn out that way. But he's trying to make a role for himself. I think he's a guy who would give a nice contrast with Maxey from a guard standpoint, having those traditional point guard skills, but having the athleticism to, be able to get to the rim, specifically in the pick and roll or, on a swing where he can take a closeout. Now, of course, DSJ hasn't been a good shooter, in his career much, but, that's something he can continue to work on. So he kind of sticks out to me of a name that I don't think a lot of people are talking about that I think could help make an impact if they don't get Kyle Lowry. And then from the forward position, it's not really a lot of options out there. Of course, everybody knows about Twin trying to come back home, but I don't know. Like the Sixers have had this theme of trying to get a little bit more athletic, although they've gotten a little older too, like Eric Gordon and stuff like that. But I don't know, really, from a veteran perspective, knowing his role and coming to play as a professional every single day, Jeff Green is like somebody who I look at like, okay, they might take a flyer on him. One, he's a former Houston Rocket, right? So we know Morey likes his former Houston Rockets. Two, you do have Andre Drummond, but we know Jeff Green can play with a big man, and he can also play small ball center if in the event that they have to do that. That's something he will be able to do. So they might take a flyer on Jeff Green to add some forward depth, but and then as far as you can always use shooting. So you look at a guy like, who knows what's going to happen with Luke Kennard. They can add him on a minimum, but that's probably unrealistic. But then, I think about minimum shooters, Landry Shamet, former Sixer. And
he does look like a Larry,
also,
though, let's be honest.
Yes. And then what would be interesting is, again, probably wouldn't play too much given his ability not to play defense, but knockdown shooter, Doug McDermott. Somebody might take a flyer on just from a shooting perspective. He can space the floor really well, and he's do a lot of movement shooting and relocation. But yeah, those are some of those guys that I kind of thought about. Hey, maybe they could take a flyer on these guys to help shore up the roster.
Yeah, I mean, those are effectively some of the top names on the market. One name, that you mentioned there who's particularly interesting. If you're looking at shooting, or I guess I should say two, Luke Kennard, I think is moderately interesting. Then from there, there's Landry Shamet, who actually just cleared waivers. So Philadelphia would now be able to sign him potentially to a minimum deal if, he is able to, or willing rather, to accept such a move. But a couple names that we have here mentioned in the chat, Gordon Hayward and Precious Achiuwa. Gordon Hayward is, and this, differs with my personal take, probably among the most talented names on the market. I don't imagine that he would want to play an end of bench role here in Philadelphia, or at least, as reserved a role as the Sixers would have in mind for him. When he went to Oklahoma City last year, there was clearly some miscommunication in terms of what his projected usage was supposed to be versus what his actual usage ended up being. So depending on his expectations, maybe it's a fit, maybe it's not. Precious Achiuwa is the other name that's been mentioned. If Precious Achiuwa is willing to take a vet minimum deal, I mean, that's, I think, an obvious win for Philadelphia. Talking about a guy who is versatile defensively, has a lot of the same benefits that Sixers second round pick of Dembona has. Not necessarily a floor stretcher, but at least capable of once in a while knocking down a shot from deep. I mean, those guys, I think, yeah, you could say they'd be A+ grades. It's very tough to see who's going to go for what. You're not seeing a lot of that mid-tier money being paid out, but I would imagine somebody does offer Precious more than the vet minimum, but definitely I would say an intriguing name nonetheless. We do have another bit of breaking news, And before I get into that, I just want to pause and say, what's up, Nick? I see you here. Great to have you in, man. Talking about how excited he is for the Summer League game. The breaking news has to relate with the Summer League game in that the Sixers are going to be starting Jeff Doughton, Jared McCain, Justin Edwards, Ricky Council, and Adem Bona tonight. That's your starting five for the first Summer League game for the Philadelphia 76ers. So not necessarily any surprises there. I think some guys that we really expected to see. And, of course, we're filming, or rather going live a little bit early today so that way we can wrap this up in time to be done to all enjoy that Summer League game. So should be a lot of fun tonight to see the Sixers go up against actually, who are they playing in the first Summer League game?
Thunder.
Oh, even better. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Out there in Salt Lake City should be a great start to their series in Salt Lake. But yeah, no, just excited to see that go. Dirty Clips checks in, talking about Joel Embiid eyeing a championship run with the Sixers' new big three. Yeah, Embiid has talked about this a little bit. He was talking to Tim Bontemps, I think it was, and talking about how he is a bit, and I'm paraphrasing, a bit relaxed, let's say, because he may not necessarily have to press as hard during the season. Feels like he may be a bit more healthy by the end of the season because he's not going to have to score 30, 40 points a given night in order to win a game. So that's one benefit that I think we may have even glossed over is just the preservation efforts in terms of health as well for Joel Embiid between now and the end of the season. But all of that, of course, making for hopefully what will be a very exciting season. We're coming up against the time, so I do want to move on to just one last thing, and that was the nasty, nasty tease by the Philadelphia 76ers of those Iverson black uniforms. So Tyrese Maxey being honored at the Museum of Maxey or whatever official name they went with. If they didn't call it that, they should have. But the Museum of Maxey, they of course showed off some of the career highlights of Tyrese. They had a wall of every jersey that Tyrese has worn since being drafted by the Sixers. Video messages from his teammate Joel Embiid, Philly legend Don Staley, all that and a lot more. And then Dr. J came out and he brought Maxey over, showed him the wall with the jerseys, had Tyrese ring the bell. Great moment. Tyrese turns around. Dr. J is holding an Iverson-era Tyrese Maxey jersey. People immensely filled with excitement everywhere. It's just shrieks across the Delaware Valley. And then we see an issue of Slam Magazine with Tyrese featured on the cover in that same uniform and a message that to the effect of Philadelphia fans asked for it and now the Sixers have provided it, or again, something to that effect. The new City Connect uniforms. Unreal excitement in Philadelphia. I mean, you could hear people shouting from the city over here in Jersey, right? Just some like prayers answered for years and years and years. And this isn't, the Chris Heck Boathouse throw jerseys or anything like that. This seemed like what people actually wanted in Philadelphia. This seemed like the perfect opportunity. You bring in Paul George, you form a new big three. Tyrese Maxey re-signs on a 5-year deal after his first All-Star season. Joel Embiid is in the Olympics representing the United States for the first time in his career. You have all of this excitement building around the team, just palpitating left and right. Then it comes out, CBS reported first, Adam Aronson of Philly Voice confirmed that while the Sixers are trending towards bringing those back, they will not be the city edition for the 2024-2025 NBA season. Justin, immediate thought when you found out that we were fooled once again and the Iverson jerseys are not coming back this season?
Just upset, man. I was ready to give my money to Fanatics or whoever to get a version of the jersey for Maxey and Embiid, whoever. Would have got my son's name on the back of one, got him one, like everything. But just to see that it's not coming this season after being promised it years ago. And specifically, you talk about the Chris Heck Bauhaus Road jerseys. Even back then, we thought we were getting the jerseys, and they turned out to be the Bauhaus Road jerseys. And he said he wanted to do something different. So it's like it's been teased.
They said it was going to be the jerseys. They teased it as such. And then he came out in an interview after saying, "Oh, no, I hate those jerseys. But, we wanted to." This is when he started saying how, forget blue collar Philly. We're new Philly now and all that other bullshit, an unreal interview that just will launch you back in time if you go read. I didn't mean to interrupt. It got me pumping again.
Nah, I'm hoping that with the preview of this and knowing that it's coming a year from now or maybe longer, they better have something good for this year's City Edition or City and Classic, whatever they decide. They better have something good planned, because if it is remotely bad, everybody will be in an uproar because they could have just did the Iverson-era jerseys.
Here's the problem, though, is that it doesn't matter how good they are, right? Fans are not going to be happy that they're the City Edition over the Iverson-era jerseys. So with that being said, you may have just cost yourself jersey sales by hyping up the Iverson jerseys just to not deliver them once again. Sam, are you even an Iverson jersey guy? I'm not saying that, not thinking that you're not, but are you an Iverson jersey guy? Were you, a little like, what the heck are they doing when they kind of, pull the rug out from under fans on this one?
Yeah, I like those jerseys a lot. Like most sports jerseys, not just basketball, but sports jerseys in the late 90s, mid 2000s, they were fantastic. And I did find it very interesting to do this now with not the intention to release them this season. Like, I get it, you want to tease it, make the maxi vid, which is already great on its own, makes it even better, but you also didn't need that. The maxi video, him getting honored, them making the museum was fantastic on its own and extremely well deserved. So just to do it now and get some hopes up, I guess you're starting to get the ball rolling on that hype. I think it's fine that they're going to wait a year. I mean, tempering expectations, things can't get too good, right? Can't have everything all at once. You got to be patient a little bit. And if this is what, listen,
you can't tell Sixers fans that they gotta be patient. That's the last thing.
We're all grown ups here. We can wait. There's already a lot of good things going on right now. I think keeping them, for next season. Listen, it's so much better to know that they're on the way. And the fact that they could have just, had Dr. J give Maxey the jersey or whatever, but the fact that they edited that slam cover to say pretty much saying yes, we know, we hear you, and we're going to do something about it. It stinks that it's not this year. To tease it and then have to wait more than a year, that's going to stink. But at least we know it's on the way. They're in the works.
But do we? When is it coming? Is it coming when the stadium comes? Because I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't know how accountable they can be held for just jerseys, but at least there's some indication that they know. But I will also say, I'm very interested to see if they just straight up bring those jerseys back, or if they alter them a little bit. The Knicks brought back one of their popular jerseys this season, the late stage Patrick Ewing era, the pinstripe ones where they made the big part of it is the black panel on the side. They wore it when they made the finals in '99. Fans have been wanting that forever, but then they changed it with the pinstripes with the two New Yorks across the chest, and I warmed up to it, thought it looked still pretty good. So I'm very interested to see if the Sixers do that, if they do something like what the Jazz have done, where they take the mountains back and they're changing it, modernizing a little bit, or if they just bring back the jerseys as they were, which I think they honestly should do. They were fine as they were, doing the same essentially what the Eagles did with the Kelly Green, what the Phillies have done with the throwback baby blues, just bringing it back as it is. Fans are going to appreciate that a lot. It's really funny to have it teased only to oh, maybe we'll do it later. But the fact that there's at least some legitimate indication from the team that they're coming is, I think, a great sign.
Yeah, I mean, I listen, this seems more like a wink and a nod, like we've seen from the team and from Daryl Morey himself at times. More than anything, what this effectively feels like is another case of trolling, which from Joel Embiid's team, from Daryl Morey's team. Like it's got to be expected at this point. But all I'm saying is they're going to have to introduce these jerseys fast, or I can't hold back the city of Philadelphia, because the excitement level from so many people out there, only to have their dreams dashed yet again. I mean, but no one is a bigger winner out of all this than DHgate, who is now going to be making millions more knockoff Iverson-era Tyrese Maxey jerseys. But it was one of those things where it was a layup opportunity. They smoked the layup, and it's a shame. But it is what it is.
They can get their offensive rebound and put it back up if they want to. They can do that still. We will see.
They can, but what have you seen to indicate that they will?
Yes, I know. We need to see if they will.
Is the big question. All right. Well, we'll be back next week to talk a little bit more Sixers, review some summer league stuff. Sam and I are going to be talking to a couple Sixers between now and then. So, we'll kind of go over what some of the new additions have had to say. And just break down a lot of those exciting talks. For now, that is it for this episode. Again, be on the look tomorrow, Philly Sports Network. All I can say is check after 9 a.m. Look for something a little special from me and one Sixer in particular. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining us, for listening. I've been Zach Chavalella, here with Justin Crosby, here with Sam DiGiovanni. And this has been another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast.